Let's get right into it. When we talk about protecting the environment in India, it's not just about protests or political debates. It's actually woven right into the country's legal fabric. So today, we're going to break down 4 absolutely crucial laws that make up India's environmental and animal protection shield. And this is really where it all starts. This isn't just some vague guideline for the government. Nope. The Constitution of India itself says that protecting our natural world is a fundamental duty for every single citizen. And that idea, that this is on all of us, is the foundation for everything we're about to cover. So, how does this all actually play out? Well, here's our roadmap. We're going to start with accountability when disasters strike. Then, we'll dive into how we protect wildlife and their homes. After that, we'll look at preventing animal cruelty, and we'll even dig into a colonial-era forest law that's still kicking around today. And finally, we'll tie it all back to that core idea of our shared responsibility. First up, we've got a law that was literally born from tragedy, designed to make sure there's immediate accountability when the worst happens. You see, this law didn't just appear out of nowhere. It was forged in the aftermath of one of the world's absolute worst industrial disasters, the Bhopal gas tragedy. The incredible suffering and the long, painful fight for compensation made one thing crystal clear. A new legal framework was desperately needed to help victims and help them fast. And at the very heart of this law, it's a truly game-changing idea: no-fault liability. Now, what does that mean? It means victims of an industrial accident don't have to spend years and years in court trying to prove a company was careless. If an accident happens while a company is handling hazardous stuff, the owner is automatically liable for providing relief. It just flips the burden of proof, which is a simple but incredibly powerful shift. So the law puts very, very clear duties on the shoulders of these industries. First, and most importantly, they have to provide immediate relief to victims. Second, they are required to have insurance that specifically covers these no-fault accidents. And third, they also have to pay into a national environmental relief fund, which creates a safety net for any future incidents. The Act also creates a really clear, streamlined path for victims to get the money they're owed. It's a simple process. You apply to the local collector, they hold an inquiry, and then they make an award. And get this, once that award is made, the insurance company has just 30 days to pay up. The whole system is built for speed, to make sure victims get some measure of justice without delay. Okay, so from industrial sites, let's zoom out into the wild. We're now looking at the main legal shield for India's absolutely incredible biodiversity. The starting point of this act is super clear and super powerful. You cannot hunt wild animals, period. The law sorts species into different schedules based on how endangered they are, and for pretty much all of them, hunting is just flat out illegal. Now, there are some very rare exceptions, like if an animal becomes a direct threat to human life, but the default setting is always total protection. The Act also creates protected areas. So what's the difference between them? Well, on one hand, you have a sanctuary. Think of it as a protected space, an important area where some human activities might still be allowed, but they're regulated. A national park, on the other hand, is like a fortress for nature. The rules are much, much stricter to give the ecosystem the absolute highest level of protection possible. And believe me, this law has teeth. If you're caught breaking the rules when it comes to a highly endangered Schedule I animal, we're talking tigers, elephants, rhinos, you are facing a minimum of 3 to 7 years in prison. This isn't just a fine or a slap on the wrist. It's serious jail time. That really shows you how much value is placed on protecting the nation's most vulnerable species. All right, let's shift our focus now. We've talked about animals in the wild, but what about the animals that live among us, in our homes, on our farms, and in our cities? This law gets very specific about what legal cruelty actually is. And it's not just about active violence like beating an animal. It's also about neglect. Things like failing to provide enough food and water, keeping an animal crammed in a tiny cage, or just abandoning it. All of those are punishable offenses under this act. But this act wasn't just about punishment. It was also about being proactive. It created the Animal Welfare Board of India, which is a formal body whose whole job is to advise the government and to actively promote the humane treatment of animals all across the country. Okay, for our last law, we're going to do a little time travel. This act goes all the way back to 1927. but it's still the main law for how India manages its forests. And because of its colonial roots, it's also a law with a pretty complex and, frankly, often debated history, especially when you talk about the rights of communities who live in those forests. This act basically sorts forest into two main buckets. First, you have a reserved forest. Think of this like Fort Knox. It's the highest level of protection. Pretty much all activities like hunting or cutting trees are banned unless you have a special license. Then you have a protected forest. It's still government-owned, but it allows for some traditional use by local communities, so it's a slightly less restrictive category. So who actually enforces all these rules on the ground, deep inside these huge areas? Well, the law gives a ton of authority to forest officers. They can seize timber or anything else they think was taken illegally. They even have the power to arrest someone without a warrant. And here's the really big one. Statements that are made to a forest officer can often be used as evidence in court. That's a power that not all law enforcement officials have. So, we've gone from industrial accidents to wildlife protection, from animal cruelty to old forest laws. Let's pull all these threads together and get back to that core idea we started with. Hey, remember that first quote we saw about the duty of every citizen? Well, here's the other side of that coin. The Constitution also directs the state, the government, to protect the environment, forests, and wildlife. It's a perfect mirror. It basically creates a pact between the people and the government, all for the good of the environment. So on paper, India has this really powerful legal shield. But with the growing threats of climate change, pollution, and habitat loss, you have to ask, is it enough? The real question isn't just about the laws themselves anymore. It's about enforcement, it's about accountability, and it's about our own role in all of this. The shield is there for sure, but it's up to both the state and every single citizen to really hold it up.